Welcome to the Author to Authority podcast. And today is the second part of my wonderful interview with Bob Minhas. We got so in deep into our topic on the last podcast. And so if you haven't listened to that yet, go to www.authortoauthority.com/podcast/S2-EP39 and make sure that you listen to it. But we got so into it, Bob never even had a chance to even get into the expertise that he wanted to share because we were just having such an amazing conversation. So I'm going to introduce Bob to you again, if you haven't heard the first episode, and then I'm going to let him loose just to share what has been on his heart for our audience. So Bob is the authority to high-performing corporate and entrepreneurial leaders with his intense circle of expert value system, which validates and clearly identifies their vision and their focus. He's an expert, and he positions you to attract opportunities naturally. His combined coaching, business ownership, education, and life experience align him perfectly to position you as the wanted expert in your field, all the while injecting his gifts of intuition and business sensibility from a combined 17 years of entrepreneur experience. So welcome back to the show, Bob.
Hey, stranger. Long time no talk. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's been, what, 4 minutes?
4 minutes. Oh, are we letting in them behind the scenes? Are we? I thought
Sure.
we were yeah. I'm so grateful. Yeah, I'm so grateful for this because I know that we did go long because we were talking about so many amazing things. But yeah, it was really important for me, and I think for both of us, to be able to ensure that your listeners get some tangible value. That's a big thing for me, is always ensuring when I share information that it's tangible stuff that people can actually apply to what it is they're doing. So when we talked earlier, we were talking about this concept of how do you build that expert profile, if you will, online. And I think the presumption is the basics, right? Let's look at LinkedIn and let's look at a website and all of this sort of stuff. And those are really great assets to develop. But a lot of times I like to keep it a little bit more simplistic. So often when it comes to developing yourself as that expert or as that go-to expert, I like encouraging people when they figure out a niche to start in a small market, because when you're trying to grab a huge geographic market, it can be a bit overwhelming because that's our go-to. Oh, if I put a big net, I'll probably grab somebody. But when you're starting out, a lot of times when it comes to developing your audience and your niche, as we talked about earlier, there's still a bit of experimentation going on. You're still doing a bit of research. You're still getting to know your audience. So a lot of times what I encourage people to do is to really spend time on creating content. And you know what comes out of content is it really depends on what your audience and niche is. Some audiences love long tail story driven content. Others love the quick zap of a Twitter post or even an Instagram post in image form, right? So it's really understanding how your audience and your niche consumes the content you're giving them. And then when it comes to writing content, my first tip I want to give out is I love using this website called answerthepublic.com. It's a really good website because in there you can put a keyword. Now I will warn you, when you go there, it's got a bit of a creepy looking gentleman. It's part of, I think, their brand, who watches you as you type. I think it's kind of interesting, but I'm a nerd that way. And so in that search engine, if you will, you can put a word that relates to what your expertise is going to be. So let's do this. Let's talk about financial planners. I meet so many financial planners and I ask them what they do, and they'll say, you know, I help people with financial literacy. I help people develop long-term, blah, blah, blah. Because honestly, Kim, for a guy like me, it is all blah, blah, blah. I really want people to talk about those topics that nobody's talking about or should be talking about or even are uncomfortable to talk about. I'll give you an example. You know how I chose my financial planner is she was the first one to talk to me years ago when my son was first diagnosed with ADHD. She was the first to talk to me about programs, financial programs from the government around that. No one had ever done that before. So right away, I knew that she was the go-to person whenever I needed that information. So coming back to the point, using answerthepublic.com, you can put in something like financial planning, financials, finances, and it will actually crawl the internet and give you a result of what everyone is talking about in question format about that topic.
Mm-hmm.
So a really cool way to start figuring out what content should I create. So now if you already know how your audience consumes it, do they like Instagram posts? Do they like long stories? Do you want to write a blog? Do you want to create video? Now you actually know what to talk about. And that's what I love doing, is in advance, creating a little calendar and understanding these are the topics I'm going to talk about this week. And, you know, with enough time, I'd say in a couple hours, you can develop a year's worth of content. It's phenomenal how straightforward it can be, right? So that's sort of one thing that experts need to do. And keep in mind that it isn't just about putting it on your own stuff. So you create a Facebook post on your own profile, a LinkedIn, a video on your own YouTube. It's also about finding out who else is talking about these subjects, but maybe not talking about your topic, that will allow you to guest post or join in on a video or do something jointly together. Podcasts like yours are phenomenal for that. You and I both health experts, but you talk about how to help them with the written word, and I talk about how to help them with the SEO word. Really is where it comes down to. So content is a big part of that, but being able to understand where, how to generate that content, what's important. So answerthepublic.com is one. Another one I love to use for a fairly more modern, and when I say modern, a progressive, let's say a progressive audience, would be Quora.com. So Quora.com. I think I spelled it right. A really cool site where you can go and get questions. You can look at what people are already asking in terms of questions. So when you see that people are asking questions, answer them, because it's not just about reading what they're saying and creating content around it, but reading what they're saying, answer it, and watch how they come back. Do they come back and say, well, that didn't really answer my question, or that was bang on? It's almost like a validator for the content topics you want to create. So now that you've got these two websites, and now that you've ideally spent some time understanding how your audience consumes what they consume, you know, it really comes down to creating that content. So there's two components to that. Number one, the first thing you need to understand is what channels are my audience on? So you know how they consume. They prefer images or video or long posts. But are they doing this on Facebook? Are they doing this on Pinterest? Understanding what platform they're on, and more importantly, Kim, understanding as an expert, how can you display your content? How you display your expertise on Pinterest is very different than how you display it on YouTube, right? So you really need to understand the format. I'm going to say the rules of those platforms to really get the most out of it, right? Because then that allows you as an expert to put your content in the right place where the right people are who are going to consume your content. And the second one is, and I think I already said it, so I might be repeating myself, is who are the other people talking about it that you can join in and talk about it with them? You can guest blog, guest post, podcast with them. And what that does is that helps you get to a broader audience, and that helps get your expertise out there, especially in the niche, to really to really build an audience around what it is you're doing. Whether you collect them on your Facebook page, whether you collect them in email, but the key here is to become that ranking expert online. Google is looking for for proof of life, if you will, or proof of expertise, let's call it that. And proof, that validation, comes into other people saying, Bob knows this. Like you, Kim, on this podcast alone saying Bob can help experts. Google's going to see that and say, well, Kim is the fourth person to say that. So I think we should give Bob's website or Bob's profile more ranking. So those tips alone, you know, if you dedicate a good hour a day to really engaging on those platforms using those principles, who am I creating content for? How do they consume it? And what do they want to know? It's amazing how out there you can get before you've even built a website, before you've redone a podcast. This is just simple stuff using channels that are already there, where people start reaching out to you. Bob, tell me more. Or, hey, can you speak at our event? You know, when I had my first business, it was really what led me to HGTV. Was I would talk to the contractors on the show, never the stars. Never talk to Mike Holmes. I never talked to Scott McGilvery. I would always talk to the people around them saying, oh, I love this show. Here's kind of, let me ask you a question. Here's kind of, you know, and they would say like, wow, that's a really great thought, Bob. Let me share that with Scott or with Mike or et cetera. And it's amazing how that validator, that credibility comes up, because people assume you want a degree or you need a website or all of these other superficial rules to make you credible. It's not. It's giving knowledge, as much knowledge as you can, to the people that you love, that you know that you can help, constantly, over and over and over. That's what builds expertise. Because remember what we said in our first podcast is expertise is no longer just about knowledge. It's about who you are, that authenticity, those core values. That comes out in how you write. You might have that financial planner write from a very sarcastic, clever perspective, or a very button-tie, professional, factual perspective. That comes across in the content we create. So that's what I really wanted us to talk about on the podcast, was really talking about creating content. You get it because you work with authors on that same principle, Kim.
Yes. And I'm going to interrupt you because
Yeah.
I want to go back to, there's about 3 main points I want to explore just a little bit deeper.
Sure.
So the first one is, I think sometimes when we're trying to start to build our expertise, we try to get out on every single platform and become big on every single platform. And that does not work, especially in the beginning. Now, there does come a time when you do have to expand out more. Okay, so, you know, to build that bigger audience, you do have to expand out. But when you're beginning, you're better off to focus on one social media and build strong on that one social media, then start out onto other platforms.
Absolutely.
Because if you try to do all the platforms at once, I mean, that's basically, you need to hire a social media company to do that for you, because the amount of time that it takes. So, you know, focus your content in on one. So, you know, whether it be Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, whether it's podcasting, like, no, it doesn't really matter. Blogging, you know, all those kinds of things. Focus in on that one area, get really good on that one area, focus in on building the audience, because it's not just about putting the content out there. It's about making those connections.
Absolutely.
You know, taking the time each day to go on, friend request people, you know, connection people on LinkedIn, you know, whatever it is, that how you make connections on that specific social media, and build that audience and find the people. One of the things I've been doing on Facebook with this podcast, and I'm starting to do it on LinkedIn now, is I'm becoming more intentional about friend requesting people on Facebook and sending out connection requests on LinkedIn. And then every time I put a podcast episode out, anybody who's accepted my friend request on Facebook specifically, or have friend requested me, when I put the new podcast episode out, I specifically say, you know, to all my new Facebook friends, do you know that I have a podcast? I'd love for you to listen to it and share your thoughts with me. Right? So it's about building that relationship and not necessarily spamming them. Right? Because I make it clear, like, if you love podcasting, I'd love for you to check this out. Right? And so I may say, let's say there's 10 people. Usually what will happen is one person will say, Kim, I love podcasts. I'll check it out for you. Right? So now I'm starting to develop that relationship with that, you know, with that one specific person.
Exactly. And I think that's core, because again, not only is it about time and about headspace, it's about knowing that every platform might have the same people, but they consume differently, right? They really consume differently. So I love that you're doing that on Facebook and building that following that way, for sure.
And I did have another point I was going to make, and it has now slipped out of my brain.
I'm sorry.
No. Here, I'll let you talk for a minute, and I'm sure it'll come
No,
back.
it's okay. You know what? Yeah, and if it does come back, just interrupt me so you don't lose it. So the other thing that we talk about with experts is this idea of how do you build those opportunities off digital as well. So I talk about digital, and that's a huge thing, but I think we forget about the off digital, the real world example of how to do that. And you know, I hear a lot of people tell me that, you know, Bob, print is dead. Or, you know, all these other options of traditional media, even TV and all that sort of stuff. And the thing about building an expertise is you at some point you're going to need a mix of what I call a mix of medium. You definitely want to have some video, but you know, being featured in an article is wonderful. And don't forget, a lot of these papers are moving online now, so now you're gaining the online value as well. But when it comes to speakers who tell me, well, I'm just focusing on this, you know, especially in more suburb or rural communities, don't write off the opportunities to do something local as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Did you remember?
Yes, I did. I
Okay,
wrote it
yeah,
down
I
while
saw
you were
you. Okay,
talking
good.
so I wouldn't
Okay,
forget.
no, that's good. Okay, go.
You were kind of talking around your experience with HGTV and how you got on it. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
brings out a really important concept.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're going to become an expert, then you have to build a network of experts around you.
Yes.
And
Yes.
how
Very good
you
point.
do that many times is you may not be able to actually connect with the main expert that you want to develop that relationship with. But you nailed it on the head. You didn't go after the host of the show. You just started
No.
connecting with all the contractors that are on the show.
Yeah.
And so, you know,
Exactly how I did it.
when you're looking to connect bigger and bigger people, you know, it is about building that network and seeing who can you connect with maybe on a lower level that has connections to the people that you want to speak to. And it's not about using them. It's about developing that genuine relationship with them. This isn't an instant, you know, you connect with a person and then you start spamming them to get them to connect you to somebody else. It's about building that genuine relationship. And then out of those genuine relationships, the connections come. And, you know, when you've built a relationship with someone, you know, okay, let's say you're trying to get a hold of Les Brown, right?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, who are the people that Les Brown hang around with? Who are the people that work with Les Brown, right?
Exactly. You
And
got
then you
it. That's
develop a
exactly.
relationship with them. And when the time is right,
Yes.
then you can say to them, listen, I know you know Les Brown. I really want to connect with him. You know, would you be willing to connect me? And if you've developed the relationship the right way and they've seen that you're a true, kind, authentic person, that you're not using people, they will connect you.
That's that. You know what? That's exactly, I guess, the point I was trying to make with this offline stuff is those relationships are key and critical for your credibility with those other experts that you aspire to. 100%. And keep in mind, especially the way digital works, and although I'm talking about offline right now, when you connect with these other experts who have been connected with the people you're seeking, inevitably they've been connected as well. So you end up appearing in their network more often too. So it could be a direct ask, or you might find Les comes to you and says, Kim, it's funny, I've been seeing more of your stuff in my network. I'd love to ask you. They might come to you directly. And that's the whole principle of what you're trying to do with your expertise business is you're obviously there's a monetization component, but you're trying to build yourself as that go-to person. And exactly what you said, as much as I can teach people about SEO and digital, Kim, if they don't have the relationship side of what they need to do, I can't help. You can't, because then they're not an expert. They're simply an AI robot. They're simply a Google search engine, right? Without the relational side, you simply become no different than any YouTube video I could watch to learn what it is you're teaching. It's the relationship side, and as I said before, the core value side that really separates an expert from anyone or anything else.
Yeah. So I wanted just to share a little bit because you talked about content. So just briefly share a couple of my expertise points.
Yeah.
When you're creating content, please pay attention to grammar and spelling.
I am the worst at that. Thank goodness I have a lovely team that has extreme patience. But
you know, here's the thing. If you want to be seen as an expert and your spelling and your grammar is atrocious, your vocabulary level is low, you're not going to attract the people that you want who are going to pay you the money for the services that you provide. You know, that's a key component of your positioning. Now, I'm not saying that you need to be a word nerd or you have to have an English degree. Okay, I'm not saying those things. I've written over 100 books. I did really well in high school English. I do not have an English degree. Okay, so you don't need it. But pay attention. You know, read back through your work for typos. Read it out loud. If you want to know if something sounds good, read it out loud. As soon as you do, you'll find the words that you missed. You will find where it's awkwardly worded. And you will see spelling and typo. And you know what? There are online spelling and grammar checkers out there, and some of them are even free, that you can go to, plunk in your stuff, and it'll give you your grammar and your spelling.
And
So
and to that point, from an SEO perspective, Google will not, like, if you've misspelled your keywords or you've put them in the wrong format in a phrase, that actually hurts you. Google won't index it to the way you want it. So the whole point I'm trying to make is get found online by using these keywords and key phrases. But if you spell it wrong or you've put the words out of order, it just defeats the purpose. So there's two. Number one, you get seen as an expert. And number two, Google actually gives a crap.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think we've gotten lazy in our language. And people say, oh, it's okay, people understand. Yeah, some people will. But if you're looking to build expertise with a higher level of person, so I'm not talking more important or anything, but let's say that you are looking to work with financial advisors or people who have college and university, who are professionals, high-level entrepreneurs. Spelling and grammar mistakes just don't cut it with them.
I mean, would I want to trust my money with someone that can't spell money? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it really is a level of authority, right? It really does establish you as that expert, but also an authoritative expert. Now, that being said, certainly I think there can be something that is said for grammar among different cultures. But, when it comes, like, I only talk about the English language. And when it comes to the English language, you're absolutely right. It really does take a, because you know what it's like, Kim? It's like when you go to an event with a stain on your shirt and people just keep staring at the stain. You're saying all these amazing things, la da 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 da. They keep staring at that stain on your shirt. That's all they do. That's what, to me, grammar, poor grammar and spelling is.
So here's another hint and tip for you. If you're going to speak on the stage and you're going to an event, bring an extra change of clothes.
You know what I do? You're right. But you know what I do? I have a bib. So what I do is I have a sweatshirt with a zipper. So people who see me come to events, they're like, this guy's not dressed to speak. I always wear a hoodie with a zipper, and then I'll eat what I want or do what I want. And then when I start meeting people, I take it off, and then all my pretty stuff's underneath.
Well, I'll actually share one of my secrets. And my co-host Juanita always laughs when I do this because she's traveling with me a lot of time. But if we're eating in the car, I have a tea towel, like a tea towel drying cloth, and I tuck it from like here to here, and it hangs down the front of me. So, if you see me and I'm eating in the car, I've got a tea towel.
Genius. No, 100%.
Coffee, whatever. It doesn't matter. If I'm drinking something, I'm eating something, and I'm dressed up and I'm ready to go to an event, that tea towel stays on.
I'm
while I'm driving. It looks ridiculous, but
no, that's for my bib. And a couple times I've forgotten my bib, so I literally put on my winter jacket backwards. Like, so I'll put it on backwards and then I'll eat with it backwards. Because you're right, it is a huge thing. But I'm hungry, so
I know you gotta eat.
Gotta eat. It's about priorities.
Or sometimes, like, if you're ordering food. I'm not a big gravy eater, but if I eat a hot hamburger, I like a little bit of gravy. But if I know I'm going to an event or I'm dressed up nicely or something, I just tell them I want no gravy on my plate. I just want it in a nice small little bowl, and I just dip a little bit, and I make sure it's all the drips are off, and then I eat it. Right?
That's it.
Or like a lot of times too, sometimes when you're at these events and they give you food, I will pick and choose what I eat. Because I'm not going to sometimes I won't wear the big bib in public, but, I'll kind of pick and choose what I'm going to eat. And if something's dripping with some sort of liquid, it's probably not going in my mouth because I tend to drip all over the place.
I'm the same. Yeah. I think all great minds do that. It's because we're busy thinking. We don't have time to keep clean. We're just like thinking of so many great things.
Okay, so did you have something else you wanted to share with us today?
No, I'm good. I feel like I threw it all out in the beginning because I was so afraid of missing it. I just boom. So hopefully your audience they'll have to listen a couple times and go back and forth. But I think the key really is content here, and the tips you gave and the tips I gave, I think are huge. And I think when it comes to really developing that expertise brand, if you don't have a single asset, a website, a Facebook account, whatever, content on even guest content will always get you further ahead than anyone else. For sure.
Yeah. Now, I want to just talk about one other really quick topic here.
Mm-hmm.
I was checking you out on Facebook before the interview, and I saw a post that you did, and I want
Yeah.
you just to comment on it briefly. And basically, you said marketability plus visibility plus credibility equals more opportunities, and that
Right.
just got my mind spinning.
Right. To be fair, my co-host Diana and I came up with that. In fact, I think she came up. I don't want to take credit. She came up. But so, Diana and I are doing this webinar on Wednesday, and I work with mostly entrepreneurial leaders, and she tends to work more with corporate leaders. And we were trying to figure out how to really express the idea of expertise in terms of ROI. Because as you know, I can sit here and you and I, Kim, both know an expertise brand gets you so many opportunities. But we get people who say, well, what's the return on investment? If I do all this, what's the return? And that's where this idea of marketability and visibility came in, is this concept that, even if you weren't an entrepreneur, you work somewhere full-time in corporate, it is a competitive market. In fact, it's funny because this morning I was just speaking at a recruiting firm, and we were talking about this idea that it is a much more competitive market to find opportunities. And typically what will happen is people will look for jobs when either they've lost theirs or had an FTE event, right? The F this event. And so what they'll do is they're being reactive. Whereas if you're constantly working on this expertise brand, you may be in a job and you may have a career. I'm not even going to say a job. You may have a career that you love with a company that's great, and you have all of these, these accolades and recognition within the company. As you start to build this expertise brand of yourself, it serves you this marketability and visibility. It serves twofold. Number one, it actually serves the company, because the higher profile you get, the higher profile they get. But number two, when you need to look for something, not only are you being proactive, you might find when you're not looking for something, people are coming to you. Hey, Kim, I came across your profile. We have this role. I know you're not looking right now, but I'd love to see how you might be able to be a great fit for that, whether it's as one of our team members full time. Could we get you to consult? So that concept was, again, it pretty much came from Diana. It really is the idea of you yourself as an employee or as a corporate employee are the brand. You yourself owning a business, so you have a business and you sell cupcakes and the name of the business is Cupcakes whatever. You behind the business are the brand, and people
Yes.
forget us as individuals can be an expertise commodity. And it's, how do we position that by being more marketable, by being more visible, and so that opportunities are coming towards us. That's the return on investment. That's the whole point of the conversation. Instead of just reacting, well, I'm going to polish my resume and I'm going to get some new headshots and I'm going to start networking now for a job I need now. When you're constantly working on your personal brand as that expert brand, that's marketability. Credibility is establishing it with guest posts. Visibility is doing your own posts. That leads to way more opportunities every single time, even if it's a one-time consulting thing you do as a side hustle.
And I think it's important as entrepreneurs to understand that you are the brand.
Yes.
I'm the head of RTI Publishing, but that's not my brand.
Yeah.
And, I've been working on my brand, which is the author to authority, right? So the podcast is named after that. The books are going to be named after that. There's all sorts of things. And I think it's important to understand that you have to be constantly building these things. And your ROI, when we think of the term ROI, return on investment, we think of money.
Yeah.
But when you're building an expertise online, most of your ROI in the beginning doesn't always come in the form of money. And the most important ROI that you can have eventually does bring in the money, but you have to build that ROI first. So it's building that credibility, that visibility, that visibility.
Yeah, you're laying the
becoming
foundation.
that expert. And it's not that you're not making money as you're going through this process and as you're selling your expertise and your services.
Right.
But it's an intangible until you hit momentum point. Once you hit momentum point, that ROI becomes very tangible. But you have to pay the price first to get there.
It's always an investment. I think short of 15 minutes of fame on a reality show, you've always got to cultivate and build. You can't just, do a thing and then hope that it'll work out for you. And I think that's the key thing, because that's where sustainability and longevity comes in with an expertise brand. You may grow and develop and evolve, but your brand will grow and develop with you, as opposed to, again, what's the flash in the pan? So the big thing now is I see a lot of social media experts talking about TikTok. I'm the TikTok expert. I'm this and that. Now, granted, the couple that I follow, they are TikTok experts, so I love them. But there are a couple people jumping into it, and I think, well, what happens when TikTok's gone? What happens when there's a new social media platform? You know, you really have to be mindful of, they're building their expertise on someone else as opposed to just them. They're saying I'm the TikTok expert, but it's based on a brand that, you know, if they have bad press, they're going to get bad press. So I think it's really important to remember that what you said is, regardless of you being a consultant or having a brick and mortar store, there's always a brand behind the business, for sure.
Yeah. Wow, Bob, I think we've covered a lot over these last 2 episodes.
I was watching the time. I was like, don't mess this up. Don't mess this up. Don't mess this up. That's my expertise sometimes, is messing it up. Don't mess it up. I'm just kidding.
So, Bob, how can people connect with you? Because I know this conversation has stirred a lot of questions in me, and I'm sure it stirred a lot of questions in the audience. So how can they connect with you?
My favorite platform of choosing is LinkedIn. So although I have a bunch of digital assets, I love asking people to drop by LinkedIn and send me a message or what have you. Ideally, if you send me a friend request, a connection request, please put in there, I heard you on Kim's podcast, because it allows me to, because I'm very particular about who I connect with as well. So I'd love to connect with anyone on LinkedIn if they search my name, Bob, B-O-B, last name M as in Mary, I, N as in Nancy, H-A-S. And although there are a few others, you know, they'll know it's me. Because that's the point of being the expert's expert. They'll know it's me.
Well, thank you so much for thank you so much, Bob, for being on the show. Oh man, you've got me going now.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
I have really enjoyed this conversation, and you have just brought so much value that our listeners are going to be able to take away. And what I'd like you to do, I mean, we've talked about so many things. Just before we close, what would be the first step? So we've talked about a lot of things. What would be the best first step for someone to take who's just getting into building their expertise online?
Spend the time to do your research on the audience and the niche. So who is it that you're going to serve? And here's a hint, your audience is usually a reflection of you. And what in that audience, what niche are you going to talk about, to focus on? So I think it's just starting there. And when I say doing the research for it, ask people, what do people want to know? Do they resonate with it? Just do that. And just spend that time and get that clarification, and then start modifying your profiles to be that. That's it. That's the easiest, lowest barrier to get started.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Bob, for being on the show. And this is Kim Thompson-Pinder from the Author of the Authority podcast. And we will see you on the very next episode. Bye now.